Okay, here we are. Let me know when you guys can hear me, and then I will get rolling, both in the Moore's Law's Dead Discord, hopefully, and in the live chat, just so I can have multiple sources, as you always want, on if the audio is actually working. Let's see if I can also do this stream without spilling coffee all over myself. Okay. All right. Looks like the audio is working fine. I always like to check that first. For those who don't know, this is the loose ends for the previous month, which was June. I do this around the end of every month, usually the week before the month ends or within the 2 weeks after the month ends, depending on timing. And this is where you guys can ask me absolutely anything about what I've talked about the previous month, upcoming things, just really anything. Ask me anything. If you give me a tip, I will notice your question much more easily, and I really do appreciate it because it helps fund the channel. But otherwise, I just kind of jump around and answer whatever question I want to answer. In addition to, and that includes questions that have been submitted for free by patrons. So again, remember, if you support us on Patreon, you can just get those questions for free. And I think I can guess what you guys are going to want me to talk about first, which is the state of graphics card pricing. But before I get into that, let me just say the sponsor of this video. This live stream is sponsored by Micro Center, and I don't know how much I really have to say to hype them up. If you are even within 3 hours of a Micro Center, it is almost always worth going there for your new build, especially if it's a complete build that requires a motherboard and a CPU. If you look at the links in the description right now, you can get $25 off all AMD and Intel processors. And I believe that also comes with usually $20 to $40 off a motherboard if you buy that with it. So, they also have lower sticker pricing anyways. I think I know somebody who just got an i7 12700K for $340. If you use the link in the description, you can get $25 off that. And then if you buy a motherboard with it, you get more money off that. So you can get a new i7 for under $300 if you go to Micro Center and use the links in the description. Please click on those links. It really does help the channel a lot. It gets the word out there. It tells my sponsor that you guys actually support me, and that, I don't know. Go to Micro Center. They have the best prices. I'll bring them up again, and click on those links, especially if you need a new build, because you just get $25 off something that's already cheaper than everywhere else too. Anyways, let us get into the main subjects of this live stream. I will just go back and forth between Patreon questions and tipped questions from the live chat. And the first questions are going to be about graphics card pricing. I figure, let me write down the timestamp. That's just a good place to start. While I wait for some of the tipped questions to pop up, I'll start going through Patreon ones. So Chris Ices writes in and he says, with Nvidia selling an estimated 35 million consumer video cards over the last 2 years, what do you think the real percentage of those cards are that went to miners? I know a lot of gamers and a decent amount of miners myself. Every miner I know bought at least 2 dozen cards. Only 2 gamers I know bought new cards. A few bought used cards. One bought a 6800 XT on launch day, actually, for MSRP. But what do you think the breakup actually is? Well, I would say you always have to be careful with anecdotal evidence. I got a new card. Literally every friend I know got a new card at some point in the last year. They just kept their ear to the ground and waited, and almost all of them were able to get, I got a 3070 for under 600. A friend got a 6700 XT for MSRP. Another friend got a 6700 XT for $500. Another one got a 6800 XT for MSRP. So I know a lot of people didn't, but if you were waiting and trying to play the game, a lot of people were buying new graphics cards because Ampere and RDNA 2 are way stronger than the previous generations. But at the same time, a lot of miners bought cards over the past 2 years as well. And if I'm being entirely honest, I do think that if we're talking about Nvidia, 20 to 30% of all Ampere cards sold went to miners, or at least not to gamers. I don't know if a lot of people bought them for rendering as well, actually. I know a lot of people that upgraded to Ampere because of how good it was at non-gaming tasks. But if you look at just these little snippets, like these articles that have come out over the past year or so, about a mining firm buying like, 100,000 graphics cards at a time. There's just no way around it. There were definitely some months where a significant portion went to miners. And so, I think we're never going to know exactly how many cards because, frankly, Nvidia does their best to kind of obfuscate that. If we're being honest, they were sued for that. But if I'm being honest with what I believe or what I would estimate, I would say around a fourth of all Ampere cards sold went to miners, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. It is when there's high demand, and they made more cards than ever. So think of that as well. They made more cards than the previous generation, and maybe a fourth or more went to miners. Think of how much extra cards there are in the channels right now that are about to flood the used market. It actually doesn't take as many extra cards as you would think for prices to crash, right? Either you have enough cards or you don't. And if you don't have enough cards, and if you do have more than enough cards, that means that supply is, above demand and prices are just going to go down. And so it really doesn't take as many extra cards as you would think for the prices to crash pretty hard, especially if you think about, right, if a fourth of all cards sold went to miners, and it could be more, but let's say it's a fourth. That's a fourth of all cards sold over like the past 16 months. So if you think about that, then that means a fourth of the cards last year and up until now, every month, a fourth of those cards were not used for gamers. And then all at the same time, those are going into the used market, right? That's why it can feel like half of them went to miners, because if a fourth of every card sold went to miners every month, but then they all hit the used market at once, that's way, 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 way more cards in the channel than necessary. And that's why you're seeing the pricing crash we're seeing right now, right? It's just the perfect storm, especially as we go into a recession and people just immediately go, I don't need to pay $1,000 for a card. That was a luxury purchase. So that happens at the same time you have that. The same time, some countries aren't getting shipments of these cards anymore due to sanctions. And at the same time, you have all mining cards that were bought every month hitting used market at once. That's why the pricing crash is happening just like a flood, like just out of nowhere, we're having prices instead of this gradual crash. That's why. Um, and so that's one of the questions. Let me continue here. Hit the like button, everybody. I see over 400 people are watching. Hopefully we can get at least 400 likes then. Let's see here. So Bfish writes in from the Patreon as well. With Ethereum going to proof of stake allegedly in August or September, which, yeah, Ethereum's been going to proof of stake soon, forever, soon trademarked, right? Like, how many months have we been hearing Ethereum's going to go proof of stake? It's quite literally been years that we've been told in half a year Ethereum's going proof of stake. So I'll believe it when I see it. He says, as well as the upcoming next gen GPU launches, there will certainly be a flood of used cards on eBay at a time when retailers and AIBs are literally drowning in inventory of overpriced Ampere cards. Compounding this, you have a hungry AMD looking to take the performance crown with little to no inventory issues of their own. Well, they have inventory issues, but yes, relative to Nvidia, AMD's doing fine in that regard. Anyways, Bfish asks, if you were Nvidia, how would you handle the situation? Well, this is a tricky question because I don't have as much data as they do, right? So I can sit here in a chair and give advice for a company worth hundreds of billions of dollars, but I don't have as much data as they do. So I'm a little talking out of my ass, even if I attempt to do that. Let's be fair. Having said that, you have to wonder, the mining crash has already happened. So let's not even bring up the Ethereum proof of stake thing. It doesn't need to go proof of stake for there to be a mining crash. It's already happened. Like, what would I do? Um, there's just no way around it. You're not going to want to launch low-end Lovelace cards anytime soon, and probably not mid-range either. And this is something I'm going to talk about in like 5-10 minutes, but I actually am starting to put together the prep work for a video where I'm going to break down why launching Lovelace at a sensible, not even reasonable, a price that makes any sense compared to the used market is going to be brutally hard for Nvidia. Because when you actually put it down in writing and make a chart of what you think Lovelace will cost next to what used prices are going to be, it's these very hard decisions to make. But at a minimum, I'd say I would just be like canceling the low end and mid range launch of Lovelace for a little bit. And I would still try to get the 4090 and 4090 Ti out soon, though. Would I put them out as soon as maybe they were planning to a few months ago? No. But I would still want the top end Lovelace to launch before RDNA 3. Whether RDNA 3 wins in performance or not, you want to launch first. And frankly, none of the Ampere cards are going to be remotely as powerful as a 4090 or 4090 Ti. It's several tiers higher in performance than a 3090. So you really aren't competing with yourself then. So what I would do is try to capture the ultimate enthusiast market share right away. If anything, actually, I would divert as much supply as possible to the high end. But then again, the problem is this. From what I'm here, I mean, well, this is it's not, you don't even need a source to tell you this. Lovelace is going to cost more to make than Ampere. It requires more cooling. It's got a denser heat. It's the transit. There's more transistors running at higher heat per transistor, and they're still huge dies. So the cooling is going to be more expensive, not even just because of the TDP, but because of the heat, the thermal density as well on a much smaller node than Samsung's 8 nanometer. It's going to be really expensive cooling on a node that's much more expensive than Samsung's 8 nanometer, probably maybe double the cost per wafer based on some articles that have come out. So there's no way around it, though. The 4090 probably has to be 1500, or well, it doesn't have to, but I know they wanted to do about 2500 and they definitely want 2000. So that's the problem, though. You can try to capture the enthusiast mind share right away, but I don't know how many of those enthusiasts are willing to spend $2,000 anymore. So, yeah, I guess let me put it this way. If it was up to me, and again, remember, I don't have all the data Nvidia has. I'm just some guy sitting in a chair looking at stuff online and talking to like a couple dozen sources. But from where I'm sitting with the information I have, I would try to launch a 4090 as soon as possible at the very end of summer, though. Still gives a few months from now to clear stock. And I would try to make the 4080 as good of a balance of price performance and enthusiast performance as I could. Like try to get a 4080 out, whether it uses 8103 or the top 8102 die that beats the 3090 Ti by at least a solid like 30%. So you can claim this is easily a full tier better. And I try to get that out for like $800 or something like that, and that way you have your 4090, your 4080 out, and these are tiers of performance Ampere couldn't offer you. So at least hopefully you can capture the entire enthusiast market right away before RDNA 3 launches. And I just wouldn't be planning to launch the 4070 really anytime soon because, well, I'm going to go through it soon. I mean, it's going to be competing with really cheap 3090s. So I don't even know what you price it at. But yeah, so there was that question. And then let me see here. All right. Let me go to some of the tips questions then, because Gordon Ung has one on subject. He asks, and thank you for the tip, Gordon. With world events, Gordon Young, with world from PC World, right? With world events, it feels like prices aren't at the bottom yet. I say hold the line. And I would say, from my perspective, I don't think they're bottomed yet either, right? And in fact, this plays into another question. Sorry, there, almost bumped the mic off. From Alexander on the Patreon. He also asked, "Hi Tom, I currently have a Titan X Pascal, the first one, not the XP with the full die, that I got used a while ago, and most of the time it's been good enough for me, but it struggles a bit in VR to push high enough frame rates, and I'd like to check out ray tracing at some point. So I guess I'm not in a huge hurry, and I would like to have roughly double the performance while hopefully not spending more than $500 this year. At this point, do you think my best bet is to wait for something like an RX 7700 XT or 7700 non XT? Will that come sooner or later with RDNA 3? Or should I try to score a good deal on a used current gen high end card as prices crash this summer? When do you think the nadir of used card prices will be? My CPU is a 5800X. Thanks and keep up the good work and give some hugs to Reese. I will. But so let's answer the first question here because Gordon brought it up. Alexander brought it up. The first question is, when will the bottom in used prices happen? And I put some thought into this. Right now, you're already seeing 3090s below $1,000 used. You're even seeing some new 3090s on EVGA's website going for like 1,100. So you can bet those used ones are going to get below 1,000 and stay below 1,000. So let's just say you're already getting 3090s below 900. You're already getting 3080s below 600. And I've seen 6800 XTs around 550, I think, on eBay. Yeah, the 3070 seems to be selling for like 450 to 500 something used to this day. So I think what we're going to see over the next month is mini models are going to get harder that haven't been hard hit yet. Right? It's no surprise that the 3090s dropped in price like a rock on eBay. There's a new flagship out, the 3090 Ti. So anyone who has to have the best is going to get that anyways. And no one really needs a graphics card over a grand. So that's why the 3090s percentage drop is the most, along with Navi 21. And then you also see 3080s getting below 600 from mining farms. I think we need to wait to see what happens with 3070 and 3060 used card prices because they clearly haven't been hit as hard as these other cards yet. So that's going to happen over the next couple weeks, I believe. We're going to have a rolling price reductions in the mid range now that the high end's been hit hardest first. And then I think over July and into August, we're going to see a slight dropping of prices of everything, with every now and then crazy deals popping up, and then maybe a bounce up or down. But I think that's kind of what we're going to see. I don't think we're at the bottom yet, in other words, especially when it comes to mid range prices. But until Lovelace comes out, I think the 3090 is going to hit a floor around $700 because I'm sorry, once you get to 24 gigabytes of RAM, I mean, that's just useful for non-gaming tasks, and there will be people buying that instead of A6000s. Even if you don't get professional drivers, I'm sorry, like, it's a fifth the price of an A6000, so, like, that's how I looked at it when I got a 3090. I'm like, "I'm getting an A6000 for $800 without the professional drivers. Whatever, I'll use the studio drivers that are pretty dang stable anyways." So, yeah, that's the first question from Alexander and from Gordon, but then Alexander's, kind of follows that up with, "Is the 7700X or non-XT good for me?" And I'd assume you mean Navi 33, because you want double the performance of a Titan X Pascal, which is a 1080 Ti's performance. And right now, our existing flagships are about double a 1080 Ti's performance. And so I think Navi 33, which should at least be around a 6800 XT, 6900 XT, and 1080p. I think that, that's going to be below 500, but it's only going to have 8 gigabytes of RAM and you have 12. And the fact that you bought a used Titan, you got it for $500. I don't know when, how recently you did, but I assume the fact that you bought a Titan, even if it was used a few years after it came out, means you kind of like having more than enough. So my suspicion is you don't want an 8 gigabyte card or like something like that. And I would kind of recommend seeing if you can stretch your budget to some sort of, I don't know, right? Some sort of Navi 32 or like the lowest end 33 product, depending on where the pricing lands. But if you're willing to just trade some VRAM, Navi 33 could be $400 and double your performance while using less energy, having better having ray tracing at all. You don't even have ray tracing at the Titan Pascal. You know, that sort of stuff. Like, I think that will fit your needs. It's just the fact that you bought a 12 gigabyte card tells me you probably want more than 8 gigabytes, but I could be wrong. Um, so let me see here. Let me just see what the other tipped question was because I know I'm missing a few here. Oh, yeah, I'm definitely missing a few. Let me make sure I don't miss those. Hi, Tom. Do you watch Wings of Redemption? Wings? I mean, I don't, but I will Google it since you tipped me. I at least owe you that. I do not watch Wings. Oh, it's a YouTube channel. I do not. I do not watch Wings of Redemption, but I mean, if they're someone that you think I should have on the podcast, tell them to email me or email me with their email and I'll check them out. Daniel Hugh writes in and he says, "What's the current status supply of AMD Rembrandt? It still seems like nothing's on the market. Any idea when more laptops will show up?" I think of this as a lot of like shipping and logistics issues. I think Rembrandt is going to start showing up right now. Like, it already is starting to show up in more laptops. I've noticed you're even starting to see some handheld gaming devices get advertised with Rembrandt in it. So, when is it going to start showing up? Now, before back to school. I think like over the course of July, you're going to start seeing more Rembrandt show up. That's I'm not 100% sure, but that is what I think. Um, Blackbird writes in with a tip. Thank you. What was Nvidia thinking when they made the GTX 1630? It's worse than AMD 6400 and more expensive. Also, RDNA 2 desktop APUs win. Well, I always love this. I guess let me put in a timestamp here since I'm kind of diverting from what I was just talking about. Let's just say Rembrandt and APU talk. Get those out of the way now. Um, First of all, what was Nvidia thinking with the 1630? I mean, I've asked some sources about this in the supply chain and people who like I won't say more than that actually. I probably shouldn't say exactly who they are, but no one knows, okay? This was Nvidia's idea. AIBs didn't want the 1630. Nvidia just remember graphics cards are like planned months to years ahead of time, so they probably thought about launching the 1630 at the beginning of this year and they said, "All right, let's launch this in the summer." And they put forth the work, planned it, started making them, shipping them, and shoved them down AIB's throats this month. That's really all there is to say about the 1630. No AIB I talked to wanted it. No one who works with AIBs or Nvidia was excited about it. They all hated it. Nvidia made them and said, "You're going to sell them if you want lovely supply." So that's really all there is. It's terrible. It's a less efficient 1050 Ti for the price of a 6400 that's 50% stronger or something or more. I think this RX 6400 is often like 60% stronger or more. It is the worst card I've ever seen released. If they were going to make a 1630, I would have assumed it would have honestly just been a slightly underclocked 1650, maybe with one extra SM or two SMs disabled more. What they did cutting it down to 64-bit for absolutely no reason makes no sense to me because when you look at these 1630s on the market, they have a cut down bus, but the die isn't underclocked enough to not need a 6-pin. A lot of them have 6 pins and dual fans, and so the BOM cost is probably the same as a 6400, so it's not gonna be cheaper. Like, if the GTX 1630 was a little weaker than an RX 6400, but they did everything they could to make it just low profile, no 6-pin required, $100 graphics cards, I'd go, I mean, I don't want it, but I get why it exists. This is their new 1050 Ti, their new GT 1030, their new whatever, right? This is their new $100, it can run 3 displays device. But the fact that it requires a 6-pin and is rarely low profile compared to how often it should be low profile, like the GT 1030 almost always was, I cannot figure out what they were thinking. Except that they maybe weren't. And then Blackbird also asked, when are we going to see RDNA 2 desktop APUs? Well, the previous tipped question was asking where Rembrandt is. You guys understand, right? Van Gogh, Rembrandt, they can't make enough of these for laptop. Why would they bring them to desktop? Like they're not. I don't think they're planning to bring them to desktop anytime soon. And if they do, I'll be surprised, because I don't know why they would if they can't even make enough for laptop. I mean, it'd have to be ones that just fail efficiency by massive amounts, but there's going to be very few yields with that. 6 nanometer is really reliable. There's going to be very, very, very few Rembrandt or Van Gogh yields that can't meet some form of validation to be a laptop chip. So I guess maybe they're stockpiling that, and that's when they launch it. But if they do it, the supply is probably not going to be great, anyways. All right, so let me see here. So let me save some more of these tipped questions and finish getting through. Some more of these Patreon questions. So Trogdor writes in and he says, what can you say about the current relationships between AIB's distributors and retail chip makers? I get the feeling based on the current supply and upcoming releases that a lot of fingers are being pointed around and some relationships could get burned. Well, I kind of already answered your question, Trogdor, with one of those tipped question responses. But I don't know what else. But the only thing I'll add that I wrote down ahead of time is AIBs are, well, distributors are pissed because distributors don't get to make as many decisions. Distributors just buy up as much as they can when there's high demand and then try to liquidate when they need to. And remember, distributors, especially like Micro Centers and Best Buys, they don't pay as much as they don't pay as little as you'd think for these cards. They usually make like 5-10% on the graphics card. So like again, I bring this example up all the time. I had numerous Micro Center workers and Best Buy workers tell me that when they get in a GTX 3060 for like $500, so those infamous $500 3060 12 gigabytes that were not everywhere, but always on Newegg because no one wanted them, they probably paid like $450 at least for them. So the distributors aren't always as bad as you'd think. There are some good ones and some bad ones. The AIBs are the ones stuffing the channel and finding weird ways to say their graphics cards. break even is $1,200 when really it's probably like 600 or something, if that. Um, but the AIBs also just kind of do what Nvidia tells them. AIBs, this is something I've heard brought up for years now to people I talk to. AMD's AIBs have a lot more power to push back to say, we don't want to do that. We don't want to sell that. We don't want to price it at that much. Nvidia's AIBs are kind of just whipping boys that do whatever Nvidia tells them to because they have to, because Nvidia owns 80% of the market. If you're someone like EVGA, you're just going to swallow whatever Nvidia gives you. And if you don't, they'll threaten you to get less supply. So, in fact, EVGA is the only one I ever really hear about pushing back against Nvidia. It's like them and Asus. Everyone else just does whatever Nvidia tells them. And so, are Nvidia's AIBs happy about the current stock situation? No. What are they going to do about it? They always do whatever Nvidia tells them to do, anyways. And so, I can't bring up specifics because it could expose who talks to who, but I have countless examples of like just tens of thousands of cards, if not hundreds of thousands of the low end ones being shoved down the throats of some AIBs for sale from Nvidia that they don't want to. Probably because a lot of mining firms canceled orders. And it is what it is. In some ways, I don't feel bad for them. In other ways, I feel a little bad because it's like Nvidia's making them sell it anyway. So I don't know. Um, all right. Let us move on to talking a bit about next gen performance. So let me write down a timestamp for this. RDNA 3 position strategy. Let's just do that because that's in the title too. So I have to talk about this. Falto writes in for the Patreon and he says, hey, as of right now, what are the prices for different tiers of RDNA 3 and Lovelace looking to be? Right. All right. Thanks for writing in, Falto, from the Patreon, which remember, again, you can do for free if you support us on Patreon. So if we were to go back like 7 months, I'm sure Nvidia was going to try to do 2,500 for the 4090 and like 900 to 1,000 for the 4080. The people that told you they were going to do like 5 grand is no, maybe for like a 4090 Ti eventually. Nvidia is not insane. So, but I don't know that they can even get away with that now. So, what I'm expecting in pricing, and I actually have a little sheet over here that I want to read because I want to start going through something to just illustrate how hard it's going to be to price Lovelace against used cards effectively. So, let's say the 4090 24 GB is based on 8102, and that's double a 3090's performance. I think Nvidia still probably wants to do 2 grand for that, at least 1,500. But let's call it 2 grand. I'm kind of trying to split the difference between generous and greedy. So let's just say it's $2,000 for the 4090. It doubles 3090 performance. Okay. Then I think they'd still try to do $1,200 for a 4080 Ti. They've been trying to charge $1,200 for the 80 Ti class since the 2080 Ti. This is something I don't think they want to yield any ground on. And let's say that's a cut down 8102, the top die. So let's say that's 80% better than a 3090. All right, makes sense. I think enthusiasts will buy it, whatever. Let's say it's like so we got like a 24 GB 4090 at 2,000, a 20 GB. And again, I'm not doubling down. This will be the configuration, but this is an example of what could happen. For $1,200, you got a 20 GB 4080 Ti. And then let's say at $800, they have a 16 GB 4080 that's based on 8103. And let's say it's like 20 to 40% better than a 3090. So still a higher tier of performance than you could buy before. So those 3 cards at the top aren't competing with Ampere. They kind of have to compete because their pricing can't be absolutely insane. But $800 for a 16 GB 4080, that's like, say, 40% better than a 3090, maybe 20 to 30% better than a 3090 Ti. I think a lot of enthusiasts will justify that. They'll be like, well, that's way cheaper. Even that's more than some used cards, but it's stronger than all of the used cards on the market. All right. I think everyone, right, all of you watching can agree with me, probably. That's not insane that they might do that, and those cards might sell to those segments of enthusiasts. The second you get below the 4080, it's a nightmare to price things, right? Let's say they give the 4070, it almost doesn't matter whether it's cut down 8103 or if it's full 80, what is it, 104, which is supposed to be 192 bit. like, if it's a 12 gigabyte 4070 that equals 3090 performance, I think they'd wanna charge $600 for that. Certainly, if it's a cut down AD103, like 16 gigabytes or something, or they'd wanna charge $600 for that, right? It's 4 nanometer, it's expensive, the die's still not small at that size. Okay, well, at $600, we're gonna have 3090s around that price. So, okay, if you ask me, would I rather have a 16 gigabyte, let's say 300 to 350 watt 4070, or even a 12 gigabyte, whatever, 10 gigabyte, whatever it ends up being, 10 to 16 gigabyte 4070, that's the performance of a 3090 for $600 and uses like 300 watts over a 350 watt used 3090 for the same price. Absolutely, I would rather have the 4070, even if it has less RAM. It's going to ray trace better, it's going to be more reliable, it's new, whatever. But still, you can kind of see what I'm talking about, right? You're still like bumping up against used cards that are the same performance at the same price. And the second you get below that, where does the 3080 Ti pop up? We already see 3080s below 600. So if the 3080 Ti is 500, they kind of can't price the 4070 too much higher, especially if they went with 10 or 12 gigabytes of RAM into the 4070. Again, I would pay more for the 4070. It's more efficient, it's got better ray tracing, but would I pay over 600 for a 4070 or pay less than 500 for a 3080 Ti 12 gigabyte that's the same performance? It becomes iffy. And then you can think about 3080s going below that. And then I don't even know where you put the 4060 if it's not based on one of these higher tier dies. Like that would place it around 3070 Ti to 3080 performance for 400, but there might be 3080s with more RAM for that price. And I'm going to break this down and put more thought into it for an upcoming video, I think. But I think you guys see what I'm getting to here. And I'm not just saying like it goes both ways. Nvidia can't price the 4070 and lower too high, or people will just buy used cards. At the same time, if Nvidia prices the 4070 at 600 even, I think that's just going to force 3090s to 600 or lower, and then they'll force 3080s to 500 or lower. And then, so it's going to be a dynamic. It's going to be an interesting dynamic between where the used market goes and where the high end market goes. And it kind of, and again, I don't know what you do with anything below the 4060. I mean, you're going to have $300 3070 Ti's probably, right? Because I'm sure the 4060 is at least stronger than a 3070. So where do you put a used 3070? It's going to have worse ray tracing. It's going to use more energy. I think 3070s hit 300, but then it becomes funny again because it's like, well, yeah, but then if the 3070 gets below 300, are you going to get a 4060 for 400 or like a 250 3070? And for those who doubt me, Vega 56 and the 1070 hit $200 about at the last mining crash. So it could happen. And I just think that means the simple answer is Nvidia's going to charge more than the most optimistic things. Like, I don't think you're going to see like a $400 4070 that's as strong as a 3090. At least I don't think they can afford to do that. Their shareholders would be furious. But I don't think you can see them charging as much as some of the most pessimistic people were. Um, all right. So that was a spiel I wanted to get out that I put a lot of thought into. Let me see here. And let me move on. And I'm going to get to these tipped questions. Keep bringing them in. I'm going to get to them. Montana writes in and he says, "Hi, Tom. Based on the information that you have provided so far regarding pricing and specs, I am thoroughly convinced that Navi 33 could send huge ripples through the mid market where most buyers are situated. However, the recent price drops make me feel that the splash Navi 33 will make at launch would be less than what I anticipated a few months ago. In particular, I think that there will be volumes of last gen cards with similar raster performance and even more VRAM sometimes competing at $400 or lower that will dampen the advantages Navi 33 was going to have. But the supply of old cards would also dampen out the demand for Navi 33 and make it easier and cheaper to purchase. So what do you think the GPU market dynamic around the $400 to $500 area is going to be towards the end of this year and into next year? What purchasing advice can you offer to people in the mid-range, still on the Pascal Polaris generation, looking for cards to keep for years to come? So let me actually move this down. Used versus Lovelace. All right, let me just make sure I don't miss where I am on the timestamps. Right. And I've already kind of touched on this. I think it's pretty simple. I've been very clear about what I think Navi 33 is. Some of the specs may be changing, but the overall picture isn't. 8 gigabytes, Navi 21 performance with better ray tracing, 180 to like 250 watts, maybe just 200 watts. It may just be a 200-watt card that performs like a 6900 XT in 1080p, less than 4K, only 8 gigs of RAM. But look, if there was still huge shortages and Nvidia dropped the ball, I think they could have charged 500. I know there have been hoeing and hawing. People would have freaked out that there's an 8 gigabyte $500 card, even though Nvidia is selling tons of 3070s with 8 gigabytes. But AMD's evil when they do it, of course. Um, but I don't think AMD can afford to do that anymore. And I've been trying to tell people this since my Navi 33 leak. Like, before you freak out about a $500 8 gigabyte card, I kept saying this over and over, podcast after podcast. It's early. Let's wait and see what happens to the market before we're so sure. Because at this point, I think AMD has to make it a 7600 XT and charge 400, at least if they want to make any ripples at all. And at $400, I still think he'll do fine, right? $400 for an 8 gigabyte 6900 XT that only uses 200 watts, ray traces better than anything in the previous generation. I would choose that over a $300 3070. I would pay another $100 for it to use less energy, not be a used card, and ray trace way better. Absolutely, I would pay for that. This is before we even know all the new features AMD is bringing, which there's new machine learning capabilities and a lot more. So that's what I think. But yeah, that's where I think the dynamic's going to be. The dynamic in the 400 to $500 range next year is going to be, look, do you want new? You're going to have new features, but at the same time, if you're willing to sacrifice a little, just get used. And so it depends what you mean. When you say, what would you advise to people who have mid-range Pascal and Polaris? I would say, well, which one? Those aren't the same thing, right? By mid-range Pascal, do you mean like 1070s they paid $500 for? Probably that's not what you mean, but if you're those people, then I assume you kind of want the newest features. You might want to go for an Avi 33. But if you're a Polaris buyer, in other words, I assume you mean you paid 200, or like there were 570s, 470s selling for $120 like 5 years ago. So if you're someone who paid like $120 for an RX 470 and you're going, what should I do? Uh, Get a 3070 for 300. Get a 3080 for under 500 if you can nab one. Or like now, if you want a game now, your Polaris card's probably falling apart. There's a difference. If you're someone that's been a budget mid-range gamer, that's the type of person I think goes for a $300 3070 if you can get one. If you're someone that was always kind of going with like a 5700 XT, 6700 XT, GTX 1070 Ti, you're mid-range, but like you want it to be a nice mid-range card. That's where I say you probably want to get Navi 33. But we're going to have to see because, again, like I outlined, if the 4070 is $600 and it's about a 3090s performance, but it uses less energy, has better ray tracing, and it's new, it's not a used mining card. I'm sorry. I think you're going to see 3090s going for like $550 or less. And if that happens, well, what do you need? Do you need more RAM or more new next gen performance? I think you're going to have a lot of choices, good, better choices than you had a year ago near the end of this year. All right. So let me get to this question here from the tipped questions. I want to make sure I start going through these. Skillers writes in, thank you for the tip. He says, do you think the RX 7900 XT or 7950 XT will be fast enough to game at 4K 144 hertz on most titles? Yeah, so let me make this be the timestamp for where I start talking about RDNA 3 strategy. Okay. Boom. How much do you think those cards will cost? Let's wait for final performance, but I mean, I think the 7950 XT. Well, let's answer the first question. Is it going to be good enough for 4K 144 hertz? That's an easy yes. Yes, I do. It's going to double 6900 XT performance, which I consider a fine 4K 144 hertz gaming card. So, yeah, 7950 XT will be fine at 4K 144 hertz in most titles. I know you'll find one title and you'll say, but if I use all ultra for no reason, you know, ah, great. Most titles I can max out in 4K on a 3070. Most titles aren't that hard to run. Most titles aren't Cyberpunk. So yes, absolutely the 7950 XT and 7900 XT will be fast enough for 4K 144 hertz. How much will they cost? Oh, I think AMD's going for $1,500 probably. I know they wanted to go for 2,000 if they could, but I think the top card's they're gonna try to be 1,500. But I think they'll probably keep the 7900 XT at 1,000 if the pricing crash gets even worse. I think they can afford to, not more than 1,200 for it. That's what I think. Could I be wrong? Could they be more greedy? Sure, but my suspicion is they're gonna just kinda do what they're doing now, maybe slightly increase prices from there and be like, "Well, the 7900 XT doubles performance, let's say, over the 6900 XT, and it's the same price or 20% more and way, way, way better ray tracing. Are you really gonna complain about that?" And then they'll have the 7950 XT, depending on where RDNA 2 or I'm sorry, RDNA 3 lands, they're like, slightly above double the performance of last gen maybe, and they'll go, "It's 1,500," double the performance of a 3090 or 3090 Ti, $1,500. And I think they can get away with that, frankly, because that's the type of performance that's just going to be absolutely absurd. Like, let me skip ahead here. John Easterling writes in from the Patreon and he asks, with next gen GPUs being such an improvement, are we going to see graphics performance outpace monitor performance? 4K 240 hertz isn't looking like a stretch these days. I would say, what do you mean by outpace? Anytime I talk about what graphics card you should use for what resolution, I get a bunch of people arguing with me. You have some people who think a 3090 can't max out 1440p because there's like one game where if you turn up ray tracing all the way, it doesn't get 144 hertz. And then you have other people like me who generally are fine gaming in 4K 100 with a 3070. So it depends. Who are you? Different people argue about what's required for what, and I think the extremes of both are a little ridiculous. I don't think a 3060 is a good 4K gaming card, and I don't think a 3090 has any trouble running 4K. You just maybe turn down one useless setting. Um, but 4K 240, I don't think we're outstripping this at all, and I think people need to go back and look at like how long 1080p was the standard. Like 1080p was the PC gaming standard resolution from like, I mean, you could argue it still is, but like even high end standard from like 2009 to 2014. And like 4K monitors adoption was terribly slow. You had 1440p monitors with a single DVI made by like a shady company being imported from Asia for like $500 because people were desperate for anything above 1080p. That's when performance outstripped monitors. I mean, you had the standard being 1080p 60 and high end to 1080p 120, and you had 290Xs that were laughing at these resolutions and 780 Ti's as well. So I don't think we're anywhere near that. I think what we actually are about to see near the end, especially of next year, is a good balance. There's already 4K 240 hertz monitors coming out. You're gonna have that. You're gonna have like LG, even I think their new TVs go up to 138 hertz if you overclock them. So like that's gonna be perfect pairing with like a 7800 XT. And if you want to go to 4K 240, 4090 Ti will probably do it okay. If you turn down a couple settings, which hello, you're 240 hertz gaming, you probably are okay turning down a couple settings. So no, I don't think it's outstripping supply at all. So let me not supply monitor capabilities at all. I think it's basically perfectly balanced. Morton, let's see, Klarskov writes in and he says 40 versus 30 laptop performance given desktop power requirements. Oh, I think the 40 series from Nvidia is going to bring 50% better laptop performance at the same power consumption. Or I keep saying it 40 to like 60%. I think same power consumption, 4 nanometer Lovelace. Yeah, you're gonna get a big upgrade in performance at same power in laptops, similar to what you saw with Pascal. It's just this time Nvidia's built Lovelace to also overclock insane out of the box to try to double performance. So yeah, that means on desktop, you're going to get like 450-watt cards that are, almost twice as strong as a 3090 Ti or like close to twice as strong, however you want to look at it. And then in laptop, you're going to have your 100-watt cards that are 50% better than the previous gen's 100-watt cards. Let me continue down. And let me see what other tipped questions we have. Make sure I didn't miss any. Because there's a lot of them. All right. Cole Meyer writes in, he says, "Hey, Tom, do you think AIBs and retailers will be overcautious in their orders for next gen inventory?" Thank you for the tip, Cole. Um, I think they're going to be overcautious to a certain degree. I think you're going to see them underestimate to be safe right now a little bit, but I don't think they're gonna bump it down as much as you think they might to completely meet supply and demand, and even if they underestimate demand for Lovelace and RDNA 3, which I think is possible, you're still gonna have so many used cards on the market that we'll be fine getting a card for some reasonable price anyways. Um, Joker writes in as well, "Thank you for the tip. The 3090 should be under $700 on eBay when a 4090 gets announced. Screenshot this. Used GPU bottom October through December is my bet." Okay. I mean, it's certainly possible. Like I say, I just talked about this. If the 47, like when I talk about where I think prices are going, I'm talking about like in the next few months. But like, yeah, if a 4070 is announced for $600 and it's as strong as a 3090, you're going to see 3090s hit about $600 or less. So I agree, Joker. I think it's totally plausible. I just don't know. The thing is, I definitely think there's going to be $500 3080s, right? The thing with the 3090 is like I got it a little early on eBay, like I've talked about my recent video for works purposes. 24 gigabytes is just useful. So I don't know where the floor is on 3090 pricing necessarily because of the amount of RAM it has, because there's gonna be that there that the other cards don't have. All right. I think I've gotten through the tipped questions, right? Keep those coming though. Um, yeah, I got through all the tipped questions. Keep them coming. I will go back to the Patreon one zone. Remember, hit the like button. Also, we have almost 1,000 people watching. Please hit the like button and please kick on. Please click on the Micro Center links in the description. If you go to those links below, you get $25 off an AMD or Intel processor. That's it. And then if you get a motherboard with it, I think you get another $20 or $40 off. So you can get like an i7 12700K for under $300 total. Really helps Moore's Law is dead when you click on these links when you use this to build a new PC. I honestly think now is a decent time to build a PC. And if you're in the US, you should be using Micro Center because they really are the best place to do a new build. Um, Yeah, let's get to these questions now. Um, Efficiency in recession. Let's make that a subject and put down a timestamp. Dr. Forbin writes in, "Thanks for supporting on Patreon." He says, "Tom, you were great in Top Gun. Keep up the great work." No, I'm not Tom Cruise, although I am definitely taller than him. He says, "Joking aside, with the state of the economy, do you feel that tech companies aren't taking pricing and efficiency seriously enough for the changing market conditions? In my mind, if times are bad, shouldn't consumers want value and efficient products? What's your take?" Absolutely. I think especially in Europe and countries with even more energy issues than the US right now in terms of pricing. I mean, yeah, I think you're not going to want a 600-watt $2,000 graphics card if it's playing the same games a 200-watt $400 7600 XT can play. Will it play them better? Yeah, it's like double the performance and triple the RAM, but you're using over double the power consumption to do what, really? I mean, turn down some settings, man. Is it really worth thousands of dollars more? So there's always going to be some people that don't care. There's always going to be some people that have the money for the top end. But I do wonder what Nvidia's um, overall strategies with Lovelace's lineup are, because when I've heard about Lovelace's insane power consumption and what Nvidia was going to do, my thought process always was, well, whatever, make a 500-watt 4090 if you want to. Who really cares? I mean, we already have over 500-watt 3090 Ti's, and look, they work. They do. I'll admit it. They work and you can cool them. So if you want to make a 4090 use that much energy, who really cares? Do it. But I always thought, well, I don't think the 4080 should use more than 350 watts. And I don't think the 4070 should use more than 300 watts. Because if you're a 3080 owner, shouldn't you want to know that if you buy a 3080, I mean, a 4080, you can put it in the same system? I would think so. You want to sell to the people and not tell your Nvidia fans that they all need to buy new power supplies. Only the 4090 owners do, and they don't care. In fact, if a 4090 owner needs to get a new power supply, oh boy, probably an excuse just to do a new build, and they'll love to build a new PC for any excuse, anyways. And it's fun to build new PCs. But that's the type of person that it really doesn't matter. So I I really feel like, yeah, anything over like 375 watts is weird because you can cool 375 watts or lower in a dual slot card. I had a 3080 Ti I tested. It was fine at 350 watts. It made a lot of heat, but it was cool enough. And even at like 400 watts, you could do it. I'm sure if they made a nicer cooler, they could fit it in two slots. But if they go over 400 watts for the 4080, I just feel like it's a mistake. I feel like they're like not reading the room. They're going to go up against like a, I don't know, a 7800 XT that uses like 300 watts and is the same performance. And a lot of people are just not going to choose them. So I don't know. I agree with you, Dr. Forbin, but we'll see because the cards aren't out yet. And, Nvidia could decide to change focus. Like, again, I know 100% Nvidia briefed their partners on a 600-watt card a month or two ago for the 4090 Ti. And since then, it's kind of sounded like AIBs actually have pushed back. And, Nvidia might decide to just launch a 450-watt card and wait for the 600-watt card for better market conditions. I don't know. So let's just keep in mind that they could backtrack on how much power some of these models use. Um, Brett Summers writes in. He says, "Hello, Tommy Guns. Hope you're doing well. How are you feeling about AMD's AMF encoder that's been being talked about recently? It seems to bring everything on par with Nvidia's NVENC encoder. Sorry. It seems like AMD is trying more with FSR 2.0, AMF, and hopefully developer relations for both games and productivity software. Do you have any news or info on if this is a big part of the push with RDNA 3 and newer architectures? Link included for reference if required." And I did put a link in the description to what Brett Summers is referencing. Let me put a timestamp down here for RDNA 3 features. Da-da-da-da-da. So yes. So a lot of the recent performance increases you've seen in Radeon drivers for RDNA 2 products is as a result of RDNA 3 driver development. I think I've talked about this recently, but I just want to say it again openly. I was directly told by a couple of my sources that right now AMD is doing everything they can to minimize latency in the drivers because latency is a huge issue for a multi-chip architecture. But if they minimize latency, that can give you latency and frame rate improvements to the existing graphics cards. And the same goes with like what they're doing with FSR, AMF, everything. AMD knows that they have a chance here. And everything I keep hearing, even though some people dispute, like everything I keep hearing is that AMD is sure they're going to wipe the floor in efficiency with Lovelace, that they think they can have price competitiveness, that they're going to go for more market share and produce more cards, and that they think they can possibly have a clean sweep in performance. Are they 100% sure? Of course not. They're never 100% sure. But they think a clean sweep in all performance is possible, along with efficiency and price. So if they think they can do that, they know they have to make sure their features are as good. They know they have to make sure FSR is well supported and good enough, and they have a good encoder and everything. AMD knows. So that's something they're working on really hard over these next few months leading up to RDNA 3's launch. They want at least perceived feature parity with Lovelace. Will they succeed? Well, just because I told you that's what they're working on doesn't mean I'm sure they'll succeed, but I'm sure that they will succeed in doing the best that they could possibly do to meet Nvidia's features by mid next year, and they want it ready for RDNA 3's launch, if that makes sense. So, yeah, and AMD doesn't want weaknesses this gen. They built the architecture with RDNA 1. They met Nvidia or even exceeded it in efficiency with RDNA 2 and even like tied top performance, arguably. With the RDNA 3, they want to go for the win. Will they? We'll see, but they want it. Let me see here then. All right, we got some more tipped questions. Let me go to those. So Wargamer2199 writes in and he says, "Hi Tom, have you heard any early whispers for RTX 5000? Honestly, it's not something I've really looked into at all. Like it's kind of sounds like a cop out of an answer, but I haven't even asked honestly about RTX 5000. What I know is Lovelace, well, Lovelace was supposed to launch quarter 3, but now it might be quarter 4. and barely quarter four because of how much stock they have in, in warehouses right now from Ampere. But, and then that's going to come out. And I don't think Blackwell's coming out until late 2023 at the earliest. So there's really no reason to pay attention to it. I do know stuff about RDNA 4. I've already leaked a lot of details about RDNA 4, like expected performance increases. Like I expected to be like, I don't know, probably 75% or more better. Well, I don't want to say at least I'm going to say what I keep saying. At least 50% better than RDNA 3, and they could double it again, maybe. Not saying anything else but that. So if AMD is going for that with RDNA 4, I can bet Nvidia is going to try to at least give 50% more performance with, I think, what's going to be called Blackwell. The problem is, I don't know how Nvidia is going to do that unless they somehow move to a working TSMC node by the end of next year. And even then, I think getting more than a 50% increase would be hard because the silicon's not going to be that much better than 4 nanometer. And so I have to assume Nvidia's got to get chiplets working next year, or they're kind of screwed against RDNA 4. That's really all I can say. But these companies try to compete, right? So if I know RDNA 4 is going to be at least 50% better than RDNA 3 and launch probably early 2024, then I would assume Blackwell is going to attempt to either beat that later or try to launch early and be like 30% better than Lovelace. Something like that. That's what I would expect out of the 5000 series now, but it's very early to be 100% sure of anything. Um, Tech Kev writes in and he says, "Friend, I just bought a 6900 XT for 850 quid new, and I got another one for 1,100 pounds in 2020 near launch. Goodbye or not in terms of price and performance?" Well, you're in another country, so things vary, but I've seen British pricing actually be pretty comparable to American pricing from time to time if you adjust for the difference in currency costs. So, and the fact that you guys don't pay taxes after the purchase price, right? So if you see a British pricing and it looks like it's higher than the US when you adjust for US dollars, remember we usually have to pay another 5-10% more on top of whatever you're seeing for the US price. Having said that, I mean, I don't know. I just got a 3090 for $800 or like 890 after taxes and shipping and stuff. So, eh, no, I don't actually think you did get a great price. I'm seeing used 6900 XTs and even new 6900. Yeah, new 6900 XTs, not even used ones, hit like $800 on Newegg. So I guess it's not the worst price, but no, I don't actually think so in terms of price performance. That's my answer. No, actually, but I don't know what the used market's like in England. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not as crazy as the US. Um, let me see here. All right, let me continue down to some of these questions. I don't see any other GPU questions in the live chat. So let me try to get the remainder that even are remotely related to that out of the way before I get to the Intel discussions. QH Freddy writes in from the Patreon. Thanks for supporting. He says, "Am I the only one who finds it funny that some people seem to be buying up current high-end power supplies because new GPUs will use more power when none of the current PSUs on the market properly support the new ATX spec for current draw spikes, which said new GPUs will likely require? Future proofing gone wrong for the gazillionth time, by the way," he says. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can say about buying a power supply right now is that I happen to know that a lot of AIBs that make both power supplies and graphics cards have been like requiring distributors to buy up power supplies with graphics cards at the same time. So like there were some distributors that were like, "Hey, we'll give you 3080s, but only if you buy 3 power supplies per 3080." And it got to the point where I know some distributors told some of these AIBs, "Hey, we'll pay you for the power supply, don't ship it." Like we'll pay you $1,200 for a 3080 and 300 extra dollars. Don't send the power supplies. Just we'll pay for what they were. So there are warehouses of power supplies right now. Warehouses. And that's the only thing I would say, QH Freddy, is if you're building now, power supplies are going to be like brutally cheap on eBay and Amazon. I've even had some sources send me Amazon listings for power supplies that aren't from like EVGA, for example. Then he's like, "See this seller here who's not an official retailer? This guy's selling a bunch of prime shipping power supplies because he's got a warehouse of the power supplies and he's just directly undercutting EVGA themselves. So, like, if you come across like platinum 80 plus 1000 watts right now for like under $100, well, that's not a bad time to get a power supply that good, anyways. That's the only thing I'd say, QH Freddy. But yeah, I mean, if you want the new standards, you shouldn't buy it now if that's what you actually want. But that's the reason I think some people might be buying a power supplies now. Um, Nori SS writes in and says, treats for the real star Moore's Law is dead, Reese. Thank you. I'll make sure to give her a treat tonight. Also, how long before 3090 Ti's go on BOGO sale? I don't know what BOGO is. BOGO sale. Buy one, get one free. When is Der Bauer coming on the show? If you want Der Bauer on the show, email him and tell him to come on. Tell him to reach out to me. I think I sent him an email to like, but I don't know if, of course, it was the right business email like a while ago, or I don't even remember if he responded. He might have though, but like if he did, we didn't have availability and he like wasn't free that month or something. But I'd love to have Der Bauer on the show. And how long before we see 3090 Ti's going on extreme sale? I mean, you're already seeing 3090 Ti's below MSRP new, but they are the current flagship. So what I would say is, I mean, until Lovelace has announced 3090 Ti's are going to be a bit more obscenely priced than 3090s. So, I'd say though you will see them for like $1,000 or less probably at the end of the year. But the fact that they were literally the previous gen strongest card means they'll command more than the 3090. Matthew Chevres writes in, thank you for the tip. Hey, brother, hope all is well. It's okay. I currently have an RTX 3090 and a 12900K at 5.1 gigahertz with a 1200 watt power supply. Do you think I'm okay to pop in a 4090? Yes, I do. Like, let's say your CPU is using 300 watts, the rest of the system's using 100 watts. Yeah, you're absolutely fine. You're going to want to set aside 600 watts for a 4090. And if it's an 80 watt, if if it's a 1200 watt platinum, it's probably ready for those amperage spikes. So I think you're fine. Yeah, I do. Um, let's see. Sam Haskell writes in, thanks for the tip. Late but curious. Okay. With FSR 2.0 being modded into games with DLSS support, how do you see this secondary adoption affecting AMD FSR community perception and mindshare? How much does this actually help AMD? Um, well, Sam, I mean, it helps AMD get the news out, right? You're going to see these articles popping up where people are like, ooh, they modded FSR 2.0 in and it works. It's kind of like free guerrilla marketing for AMD to have people mod FSR 2.0 support into DLSS titles. And that's really cool. But I do think to get to the same type of mindshare and perception of Nvidia, you got to have FSR 2.0 on the box, which I guess you don't really buy box games on PC anymore. But you know what I mean, right? You go to the Steam page, it says DLSS. You're going to want it to also say FSR 2.0 because most consumers don't do as much research and modding as me or you. They want to know if they buy an AMD card, they can boost their frame rate. They want that advertised in the game's description on the Steam store, on the Steam page. So that's what I think. I think this helps. I mean, it helps with guerrilla marketing. It helps with perception, but it really like this modding and FSR support stuff. This really only helps AMD keep the market share they have now, 20% to 30%. If AMD wants to get to 40%, which I think is their goal, honestly, they need feature parity out of the box without modding because you're selling to the mainstream then. Okay, let me move on over here. So let me put down a timestamp for some Intel questions about Intel delays. And let's just say Intel delays and 2023. Spamtham G Spamtham writes in, thanks for supporting on Patreon. And he says, what do you feel is causing all of the delays at Intel? If Raptor Lake didn't also have issues, then I would say it has something to do with tiles using Foveros and EMIB. It's just execution, some kind of political infighting, and bad middle management, honestly, is my answer. Because you have Ponte Vecchio's not out, Sapphire Rapids delays those used tiles, but then you have Raptor Lake seemingly slipping from quarter 3 to quarter 4, at least with some people thinking the real volume isn't until late quarter 1, if we're being honest. And then you have Alchemist isn't out. Alchemist doesn't even use Intel nodes. It uses TSMC nodes. It's execution. It's bad management. It's not keeping your eye on the ball and telling people what to do correctly. That's what's going on. And I actually talked to someone at Intel today who was talking about how there are emails going out that this is something Pat Gelsinger is trying to nip in the bud right now as we speak, and that they understand they have an issue. They do. Intel understands. It's just they've had so many delays. It's like I'm not hating. I would be an Intel fanboy if I wasn't skeptical. I would be an Intel fanboy if I didn't start going, look, Intel, you got to prove it for me to believe you anymore. And that's what's going on. But Intel knows they have the issue. So that's really all I would have to say about that. I think this 2023 is going to be a key year, especially at least for how I perceive how Intel's going to do, because all of their upcoming products sound great. My last video talked about them for the second half of the video. Actually, I think technically most of the video was about Intel's upcoming products and delays. Look, if Raptor Lake launched in August with the same performance Raphael Zen 4 has, but maybe it uses a little more energy, the platform's a little worse, whatever, win. They took the crown first and they're launching first. I think enthusiasts would buy up Raptor Lake. But if they launch after Zen 4, who's waiting to get Raptor Lake for like the same performance on a worse platform? Who? I don't know. Especially when people know they'll be able to upgrade to Zen 4 with Vcache. If that's not out sooner than people think, Zen 5, Zen 6, who knows if there's like a Zen 5 Plus? I heard there could be. So all of these generations are coming to AM5, and if AM5 comes out first and it's better for a better price, I don't know who's waiting for Raptor Lake. And timing matters. And then you look at Meteor Lake. I've been hyping up Meteor Lake. I'm the one who leaked Redwood Cove in Meteor Lake first. I was excited for Meteor Lake since 2020. I first leaked Meteor Lake details in 2020. I'm excited for it. I am. But it was supposed to come out end of this year, early next year to laptop. And if it ends up coming out late next year, Phoenix is just going to wipe the floor and then Strix is going to come and crush it. And Meteor Lake Desktop, I am getting indications, as I leaked in my last video, which you should watch. It's doing very well, but if you missed it, I'm hearing that LGA 1851, which is the pin count for desktop Meteor Lake, I've heard that might slip to 2024. So if Meteor Lake Desktop launches at the same time as Zen 5, who cares? And so all of these things, desktop Meteor Lake, mobile Meteor Lake, Raptor Lake, are awesome products. I think they're great. I think Alchemist would have been fantastic if they launched like a 16 gigabyte 3070 at the end of last year when everyone needed it. But if Alchemist comes out end of summer to desktop, like in reality, right? If Raptor Lake comes out in December or some November, if Meteor Lake Mobile comes out second half of next year, I'd be a fanboy for me to not say that's bad. It's just too late. And so no more slip ups from Intel is my opinion. But Patriot writes in with a good point, and he says, why is everyone so certain AMD will deliver in time considering their delays in the past? Um, I would say that I'm not 100% sure that everything AMD has coming will release with zero issues. I never claimed that AMD is perfect or won't have some problems. Zen 4 is coming out, as far as I can tell, at least half a year late. AMD has delays sometimes, but AMD always has a good excuse lately. Pandemic, you know? So I, I'm not saying AMD won't have launch issues here and there. I'm just saying if I was going to bet money on if an Intel or an AMD launch will be delayed, I think you can guess which one I'm betting on if I don't know what the product is. And I would just say to you, Patriot, which product are you talking about? I'm not making any claims that AMD isn't going to have delays with products every now and then. They will. It's just, I think they have shown in the past 4 years that they're going to launch things in a more timely fashion more often than Intel is. And this is something Intel has to fix. Right. Have I missed any tipped questions? That's the Intel stuff. No. Okay. Let me see here then and move on to some final Patreon questions. Again, remember, click the links in the description to get $25 off any AMD or Intel CPU at Micro Center. This is the perfect time to build. You also get money off a motherboard with it as well. And Micro Center is just the best place to go right now for pricing. If you're doing a new build, and power supplies I've just said are cheap. Processors are dirt cheap at Micro Center, and you can get used 3090s for under $900 and use 3080s for under $600. Now is actually a decent time to build. If you do, click on the links in the description to support me and support saving yourself some money at Micro Center. And hit the like button, everybody. There's almost 1,000 people watching. Let's get 1,000 likes. But let me put down a timestamp for some random reader mails here. Okay. Knobhead writes in, dumb question, but since the ARM deal is off the table for Nvidia, could you imagine Nvidia getting into x86 CPUs to rival Intel's Core and AMD Ryzen series? Do you think it's hypothetically possible or financially viable? Well, I've said this many times. I've been told by contacts who know Jensen that he wants to get into the CPU game at some point. So this should always be in the back of your mind. Jensen wants to get into the CPU game. It's a prestige thing for him. He wants to directly compete with AMD and Intel eventually if he can. Does he need x86 to do that? I don't know. Does he? I mean, ARM eventually, Windows 10, Windows 11 is putting in more and more effort into making Windows support ARM well. I'm not saying there's going to be ARM gaming PCs that work well in the next few years, but I don't know that I'd be so sure Nvidia is going to go for x86 versus just continuing to develop ARM architectures. And I think we all need to remember why Nvidia was blocked from buying ARM. It's because the regulatory it's because regulators decided that Nvidia has no reason to buy ARM besides monopolistic practices. And if you buy into that at all, that means Nvidia doesn't need to buy ARM to keep developing ARM. And if you look at their roadmap, they're still making plenty of ARM stuff. And look at Apple. Apple is making their own architecture derived from ARM. They didn't need to buy ARM. Nvidia doesn't need to buy ARM to keep making ARM products. All that happened is regulators stopped Nvidia from trying to make some sort of monopoly with those types of chips. That's all that happened. Nvidia can still continue their ARM roadmap fine. They just won't get to be a monopoly. And so, no, I don't really see Nvidia going for x86 anytime soon. If there were real plans to do that, I probably would have leaked by now, by the way. No, they're going to keep developing ARM, and they don't need to buy ARM to do that. Brad Medlin writes in from the Patreon. Thank you for your support. What are your thoughts on Meta removing the Facebook login requirements? It's dumb, I know, but this has a lot of development implication for Meta devices. What are my thoughts? Nothing. I mean, look, Facebook is, I'm sorry, Meta is pivoting to be more than just Facebook. They've seen the writing on the wall. Facebook isn't going to be the champion forever. There's only so much market share you can gain, even if it was the champion, and they need to pivot into what they think is the next big thing, VR. So it makes sense that they would remove this, and it also makes people happy. So that's Meta is the name of the company for the reason, would be my only answer to that. They see themselves as becoming the VR company. The online, you know, the online Ready Player One company. That's what they're going for now. And that's why they would do that. Tetsuya Shiba writes in, do you know if Intel is in talks or vying to be used in upcoming Xbox and PlayStation refresh consoles? I mean, like, I guess I can't 100% say, but no, they're not. I mean, like, no one ever mentions them at Microsoft or Sony for a console. So, no. And I get these questions every now and then. There's just, I don't think Intel's playing for this at all. So, no. Okay. And that means I have gotten through the loose ends Patreon questions. So now if you're a Patreon member, and remember, you can subscribe to the Patreon right now and ask free questions. Go to the After Video Chat channel to get your free questions in on the Moore's Law is Dead talking or Moore's Law is Talking Discord, which you get access to if you support Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. And otherwise, I will just look for questions in the live chat as well. And remember, we got an upcoming guest as well, Meyer Tech Rants. He was on one of the most popular broken silicons in history. You can ask us questions. We've delayed the recording to Sunday because he got sick. So there's still room to ask questions if you join the Patreon right now. That will be read on the next broken silicon. So again, just plug in the Patreon there. And then let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. Okay. Let us move into this question. I like this one. This one comes from the Patreon. Put down a timestamp here at 1:13:52. Switch to. All right. Big Jeff B writes in, "Hey Tom, I was just wondering if you know of any other chips Nintendo may really consider for the Switch 2, Super Switch, I like, or just to be weird and dumb, Switch 64." I don't think they'll call it the Switch 64. He says, "I know there is the Orin NX10 watt variant, but I read somewhere that there was another chip higher than 10 watts and lower than 25 watts." Um, Here's what I can say about specifics on the Switch 2. I am starting to get some stuff. And in fact, I was already told to not leak some stuff about it. So, what I would recommend is people go back and watch my Super Switch leak from last year. A lot of the stuff that both speculated and leaked from sources in that sound true in terms of release date and the targeted performance. And I'm starting to get more stuff now. I can't say it quite yet. I want to wait and save that for a video and wait to get the okay from a couple people that it's safe to leak some things. But in terms of your question about what the hardware will do, yeah, it seems like it's some sort of Orin variant, probably, is what I would say based on the specs I'm hearing. And I would say Orin NX. And yes, there is a bigger Orin. There is the up to like, what is it, 65 or 50 watt Orin with 2048 CUDA cores. I don't think Nintendo would use that. And I've seen there's been another leak out there on Twitter as well that said something about like 1792 CUDA cores. If that is what Nintendo's going with, I would assume they're using a TSMC version of the top Orin. Now, the top Orin is like, I think, a 50 watt, 65 watt chip, but it has a TDP down to at least 25 watts, maybe 15 watts, I think, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. So if you were to take that from Samsung 8 nanometer and make it on TSMC 4 nanometer or something, yeah, I mean, I could see that top, 2048 CUDA core chip actually being 10 watts or something, if it could be 15 watts on Samsung 8 nanometer. So that's the only unknown, is if they're like doing a custom version of Orin, maybe with some Lovelace enhancements on TSMC. But if they're doing it on Samsung, and I think they still might do it on Samsung 8 nanometer just for like massive market share reasons, because they could just have spit out almost as many of those as they wanted, then I think they're basically limited to something that'll be like a less than 1000 CUDA core Ampere APU that uses 10 watts. And that's what they'd probably target. And that would still be something that's like, God, I don't know. You'd still be talking about an APU that's like maybe 10 times better than what's in the Switch, which is like underclocked Maxwell. So it still would be a lot better. I would say that. Let me see. Any tipped questions? I don't think so. But yeah, so that's what I'll tell you about the Switch 2 now, and expect there to be a leak eventually about that. Let's see. Gamers, let's see. Iron Christian writes in. He says, "Hey, More. I'm not More. I'm Tom. So the RTX 40 series, is it worth buying as soon as it comes out? Will it increase in price after a while or decrease? The RTX 30 series did because of crypto miners. Well, I mean, and because of rendering and gamers who were willing to justify it as well. It wasn't just miners. Um, I mean, is it worth buying the 40 series? Do you need the performance? Uh, eh, I don't think we're gonna see what happened last gen with pricing. I just don't. So if you want the next tier of performance, buy Lovelace when it comes out, but don't feel rushed because I don't think the prices are gonna go up. I'll eat my words if I have to. I just do not think so. Hmm. Someone says they caved and got a 6700 XT for $390 with their first paycheck. That's not a bad price, man, and you get to game now instead of waiting. Kepler writes in. Oh, Kepler from Twitter. Well, I would say is kind of friend of the show. I've had what would you say, encounters with Kepler before. That sounds actually really weird that I put it that way. My apologies. But Kepler writes in and he says, Battlemage still coming in 2023. Everything I know is Battlemage is still supposed to come out late 2023. So, I guess we'll leave it at that. But again, it's like it's Intel. So, like, am I gonna double down on that? No, but I will say Intel still doesn't see why they can't launch Battlemage late 2023. And remember, um, they're trying to solve their execution problem, and they started working on it like a year ago, or a year or so ago. Pat had to take over, work for a bit, and then start implementing change. It takes time to implement change at a company as big as Intel. So when you talk about will Battlemage actually come out in late 2023 like it's supposed to, I go, we'll see if they fix the company by then. 2023 is going to be an important year, but for right now, I don't hear anything about Battlemage being delayed. At the same time, it's Intel, so it's like, don't bet your house on it. Meximan and Cheese writes in, thank you for the tip. Since most motherboards have HDMI ports that aren't used, would it be possible to program those to capture video using onboard graphics in the CPU? Well, it depends what you mean by capture video, because when you capture video, you're capturing the signal that comes through the HDMI port. So if you're capturing video through the HDMI port, you're capturing the video going through the HDMI port. So only if you're outputting through that HDMI port. Um, but no, there's no hack to like see what's going on in the other stuff. Um, Here we go. We get asked this every live stream. Jacob Bowl writes in Metal Gear Solid remake? Question mark. I don't know, man. Where's the Bloodborne remake? I know that thing is real. I don't know why it hasn't been announced yet, but it is what it is. And for sure they're working on something Metal Gear Solid right now. I just don't know when. And everyone I've asked, and I haven't asked that recently. I think I asked about the Metal Gear Solid remake like half a year ago again. I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" And the only answers I get are I don't know where it is, So all I can say is, where's a lot of games? Why did God of War have to be delayed a year? Why did where's Starfield? These games take time to make, and it is what it is. But no word on anything being canceled, and I wish it was out now. Bloodborne remake PC. Yeah, I think you can almost take it to the bank that the Bloodborne remake will come to PC when it comes out. I just don't know when it's coming out. If I had to guess, a lot of it just has to do with how many resources they're putting into it and timing. Like, if you're making a Bloodborne remake, I think you would probably time it to come out not next to Demon Souls, not next to Elden Ring. You want to wait for And so then, like, are they gonna wait for the Elden Ring DLC to come out first before they launch? Because there's gonna be Elden Ring DLC, guys. I think we all know that, right? The game sold so well. Um, I think they'd want to time Bloodborne remake to be in between Elden Ring and other stuff. And so I would guess the Bloodborne remake, if it's not this fall, is going to be next fall, by next fall. I'd be blown away if it wasn't. And I know there will probably, if it doesn't happen, people will send me a link to this and say you were wrong. And I'll go, yeah, I was, but I think it should be out by next fall, you know? Let's see. Mexi Man says, I didn't mean a hack. I meant from the maker. It's just an idea since everyone wants to be a streamer now. Well, so Mexi Man, when it comes to capturing through HDMI, you might want to Google, I forgot what it was called, but I know ASRock put a lot of effort into making this ability to output your graphics cards frames from the integrated like Ivy Bridge graphics through an HDMI. Look that up. I don't believe it ever really went anywhere because no one ever used it. But that was something they played with before. But again, that was still outputting through that HDMI. So could you? Yes, but you're gonna have to output through it, to my understanding. Weber says, "Dang, you still live?" Yeah, I usually go for at least an hour and a half. Let me see what else we got here. Eonin says, "What is your favorite sake?" My favorite sake is I don't know that I have a favorite. I do. I forgot the name of it though. I did have a favorite one, but I do like sake a lot, but I don't remember what the name of my favorite one was. I think it started with an H. Let's see what else we have here for questions. Hmm. MBR, let me put that. Let's talk about that a little bit. There it is. Let me just put here one, put down a timestamp. Next gen ray tracing. Okay. Does the ray tracing improvement from the 3000 to the 4000 series, is it enough to justify the price difference, or until now there are no news about it? Well, I've said some things about it. I think RDNA 3, from what I'm hearing, is going to massively increase ray tracing performance. It's not going to just double. It could be like triple. Again, don't quote me, but it's very much so. Which game are you talking about? Because like Ampere ray tracing performance increase was really all over the place. Like in Minecraft, it was massive over Turing, but in other games, it was like in line with Turing. So yeah, I think RDNA 3 could though triple like ray tracing performance if it doubles raster, which should be enough to kind of catch up to Nvidia. And then I think Nvidia is going to bring at least a 20% ray tracing improvement over the raster improvement, meaning, yeah, I mean, probably 2.5 times ray tracing performance. Probably with Lovelace. I'm not 100% sure. Um, and does that justify it? I'd be like, well, so let's say the 4070 is as strong as a 3090, which I expect it to at least be that strong. No matter what die they use, I'm sure that's a target they want to hit. So if you have a $600 4070 that's as strong as a 3090 while using, let's say, 300 watts, and the 3090 use 350 watts, so it's more efficient too. Would you say that justifies it if there's a $500 3090? Well, I would argue you're getting the 3090 because you want more VRAM, right? That's why you're getting it. But then would you pay an extra $100 to have like 30% better ray tracing than a 3090? I just think it would be a bit of everything, right? It'd be like if you're getting a $600 4070 over a $500 3090, it's because it's a new card, uses less energy, probably has a couple extra features, smaller, less heat, and it has better ray tracing. Um, all of those combined, yes, I think that makes it worth it. Like if there's again, let's do another example. If the 4060 is about a 3070 Ti or 3080, and it's $400, and it has 8 gigabytes of RAM, but then there's a 10 gigabyte 3080 used card for 400. The question becomes, do you get this almost 3080 for $400 or a 3080 with a little extra RAM for 400? But then the 4060 uses like, 30% less energy, has better ray tracing, and is smaller, and like I'd say you probably go for the 4060, but it's not just because of the ray tracing, if that makes sense. And I would say the same of AMD. Do you get a $500 6900 XT 16 gigabyte or a $400 7600 XT 8 gigabyte? You're like, why would I spend an extra $100 to double my RAM for the same performance and probably higher performance than Navi 33 and 4K? Well, because it'll be like half the performance in ray tracing. Is that worth the extra RAM to you? I don't know. You're paying an extra $100 to use more energy, worse ray tracing, and it's used. It's not new. So I think all these things combined will make people in the high end choose the new cards. But in the mid ranges, again, where it becomes tough. Because if your question is, do I get a $400 4060 or like a under $300 3070? I don't know, man. I don't know if it's worth 50% more for almost the same performance, even if the ray tracing is better. And let's be honest, either it's too much energy or it's not. 3070 uses 220 watts. Who cares? It's not too much energy, anyways. Um, Volk Star Killer writes in and he says, will the 5000 series be on 5 nanometer or 3 nanometer, and will it use MCM? Wow, it's too early to say. I've already talked about this. I kind of suspect it's going to use 4 nanometer again and be MCM, but that's all I can say at this stage. Because 3 nanometer, I'm just trying to think about it. I know a lot of people are worried about TSMC 3 nanometer. And I said that with Daniel Nenny on a podcast months ago, but I'm almost starting to worry that people are becoming too worried about TSMC 3 nanometer. It's not like an Intel 10 nanometer situation, guys. So, yes, 3 nanometer might not be used for some upcoming products at the end of next year. But by the end of 2024, I don't know. I think 3 nanometer will be working just fine. So, it just depends when Blackwell from Nvidia's plan to come out, if that makes sense. Okay, so let me make sure. I do have a friend coming over. Make sure he's not almost here yet. Nope. Got plenty of time. All right. Keep the questions coming. Let me see. No questions in the Discord right now. Oh, Elab's content writes in. Eliab's content writes in. He says, "Hi, Tom. I had a question that has been burning on my mind this past week. I heard that AMD's AMF encoder has caught up to NVIDIA's NVENC encoder. Let me slow down the chat there. According to Tom's Hardware, Puget Systems tested it and said it was the same quality as NVENC while streaming. Why does OBS and other programs that depend on video encoding not implement the new encoder that reintroduces B frames back into their encoder? Is it AMD's fault or do the companies not care?" Oh, it's a lot of things. Nvidia has most of the market share, so they prioritize Nvidia. Nvidia also pays to implement things, so they're like, okay, you have most of the market share, and you're willing to help pay to implement it. Okay, we'll use Nvidia. You know, AMD needs to start doing that themselves. I've already talked about this encoder earlier in the live stream, Eliabs. So just go back and watch that. I think it's like it'll be in the timestamp will like mention AMD features or RDNA 3 strategy or something, you know. But in terms of like why these companies would favor Nvidia has more market share. They pay for more implementation. AMD's got to start paying for more implementation. And I bet they will with RDNA 3, will be my answer. Jacob Bowl writes in, thank you for the tip. If I were Sony, I would release the PS5 Pro in 2024 with RDNA 4. Okay. But it's like, I don't know. I've saved a lot of the PlayStation questions for when Meyer Tech Rants comes on so we don't become redundant in the upcoming Broken Silicon. But I don't know. If I was Sony, I would lean towards launching something better sooner. Like I would lean towards a 6 nanometer RDNA 3 36 compute unit model with faster RAM and Zen 3 Plus sooner rather than later because it won't cost more to make. And this is where people go, but why sooner? Because guys, the PS5 is going to be in stock by the end of this year. It is. Okay. And then they're going to have all of this time of stock building up. That's when you just launch like a PS5 Pro in 2023, end of 2023, that has 36 RDNA 3 compute units and then clocks faster and then uses Zen 3 Plus on 6 nanometer. And that way it doesn't cost more to make than a PS5. And then I think you just give it like 21 gigabit per second GDR6, which is 50% more bandwidth, even with a 256-bit bus. So basically what I would say is design some sort of semi-custom APU that is effectively Navi 33, but 256-bit instead of 128-bit, has the same amount of ROP as, tries to be as similar to what they have now as possible, and then just clocks it faster with Zen 3 Plus. Because then you could have a similar size die that costs the same to make and launch it sooner rather than later. And let's be honest, going to RDNA 3, clocking it faster, giving it the newest GDR6, they could probably, and then maybe hardwiring FSR 3.0 into it with like acceleration. They could double performance right there and keep the same $500 price. And I think that's a smarter strategy than trying to shove a $600 Pro console, with RDNA 4 into a depressed market, right? Is that what people want? I think people probably just want Sony to double performance at the end of next year and not raise prices than to launch some mega console for $600 in 2024. That's my opinion. That's what I would be saying if I was in the boardroom, but I'm just one guy sitting in a gaming chair talking into a mic. And so that's, anytime we say things like, well, what I would do, it's like, well, they have more data than us and they're pretty successful. So I'm sure whatever they decide to do, they'll put some thought into it. Due to inflation, it's possible the PS5 Pro doesn't make financial sense. I disagree, Don Draper. Also, I loved you on Mad Men. I would say that it actually does make a lot of sense because it can justify increasing the price. Let me put this down as a timestamp since I guess I am talking about the PS5 Pro. So think about this. If they can double performance, and again, let's recap how. RDNA 3 36 compute units, clock it like 20% faster, just give it like 50% faster GDR6. They use very slow GDR6 that I've been told may not even be produced anymore in the PS5. They may be taking 16 gigabit per second chips and like underclocking it for the PS5 right now. Like you give it more bandwidth, a much newer, better architecture on 6 nanometers and 3 plus. Like effectively, the console costs the same to make, but then you adjust for inflation. Okay, well now you can justify charging 550 for it. That's why they might kind of have to do a PS5 Pro, right? They might have to do this because they need to find a way to justify selling this console for more after inflation. And in fact, if it wasn't for inflation, the console I described would about double performance without costing more to make. But then you add inflation, and now all of a sudden they can break even at 550 or 600. So, if anything, I can make the argument that the PS5 Pro is warranted because of inflation, because they need to find a reason to charge more money. Let's see here. Sony big brain underclocking VRAM and wondering why Xbox is faster. Uh, Xbox isn't faster in a lot of games, dude. Xbox also uses the same speed RAM. So, actually, let's not get into the fanboy arguments. I'm smelling a fanboy in here. Let's see. Advantage Joe writes in, just tuning in. Any news on the new 1440p 360 hertz monitors? No. I don't really follow monitors that closely, that would be fair. Let's see here. All right. Don't see any tipped questions. Don't see any questions from the Moore's Law's Dead patrons. Remember, you can ask free questions if you support on Patreon. QDOLED. Okay. I have nothing to say unless you ask a question. Well, while I'm waiting for some questions to pop up in the Moore's Laws Dead Discord and for some tipped questions, I'll just plug again. We got almost 900 people watching. Hit the like button, share this, try to get this out there. The last video did very well. I'm trying to, be great if we could boost the channel up a bit more after a slower 2021 and, consider supporting us on Patreon to get that extra content and click the links in the description to support me at Micro Center and get $25 off a CPU. I'm seeing some typing coming up here. Do you use your PC? I was talking to someone else. Wiz Robe writes in, what do you think will happen with laptops as GPUs start to consume more and more power? I mean, in some ways, laptops will keep pace because, again, look, if Lovelace doubles performance on desktop, it's going to just be like 50% more performance on laptop. So you're still going to get good increases in laptop. I also think we're going to keep seeing innovations in compact power supplies for laptop and cooling. You're going to get better and better cooling on laptop. You're going to see more and more use of like full copper heat sinks that are well designed, liquid metal use. Like you're going to see laptops do whatever they can to enhance the cooling at the same thickness so they can support look at some of the laptops we have now. The laptops we used to consider netbook sized sometimes get 65-watt GPUs now, if not 35 watts. It used to be that like these, super thin 12-inch or 10-inch, now they're 13-inch because they're bezel-less, like thin, super small, like MacBook Air size laptops. That type of a laptop used to only be capable of having like a 15 to 25 watt APU. And now they can fit 35-watt Max-Q graphics cards and a 25-watt CPU at the same time. So you can already see how we're enhancing cooling. Batteries are getting better. We're getting better stuff, in the same amount of space. So even if power usage goes up, we're getting better batteries and better cooling. So that's going to help. But I will say that after Lovelace, after RDNA 3, and then after RDNA 4, which I think RDNA 4 will bring another gigantic efficiency boost again. So let's just say after RDNA 4, yeah, there may be some slowing down in laptop performance from raw node increases as nodes really slow down around 3 nanometer. Having said that, though, we're also going to get innovations in 3D stacking, which less latency just can mean more performance. And what is a place where you're going to really benefit from low latency? Well, small devices like laptops. So I still think we're going to get big performance increases at the same power consumption with laptops for the next 4 years. Like, even as nodes slow down, you're going to have like integrated high bandwidth memory eventually on a lot of chips, like what Apple's doing, become more and more standard. And that'll allow you to increase performance by a lot. Remember, Apple isn't even really utilizing the integrated memory they have that well. It's kind of like they brute forced it into the APU. I don't think they've built an architecture from the ground up to like really benefit from it as much as you probably could. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of avenues for increasing performance still. FF writes in, after the success of the Steam Deck, do you think there will be more PC consoles with locked specs, more epic machines? Let me write down a timestamp for this. Handheld PC gaming. Yes, I do. I think that we're going to see more Steam Deck competitors coming. You're going to see more and more APUs. You're going to see Intel innovating in the performance of their APUs and graphics with Meteor Lake, and then Arrow Lake's going to have much better integrated performance as well. So, absolutely. And I think what you're going to start to see is we're not there quite yet, but I do think you're going to see a situation where you get like maybe not Mendocino, still not quite where we need it to be, but I'd say after Little Phoenix, like maybe Sonoma Valley, hopefully you're going to start seeing these like budget APUs that are probably as strong. Once we can get budget APUs as strong as a PS5, which I don't think is going to happen for a few years, but once you can do that, like in an APU that's not as expensive as Meteor Lake or Phoenix, I do think you're going to start seeing budget gaming handhelds because you'll have enough performance to game in 720p 60 with like the latest cheap APU. Once that happens, I do think you're going to see a flood of like portable PC gaming handhelds. And with SteamOS becoming more and more accepted, the main bottleneck, I think, actually to handheld PC gaming has been the OS just sucks on a small screen. But SteamOS solves that. So, yeah, with the success of the Steam Deck, with more and more APUs coming out, I think we're going to see some incredible handheld gaming devices. And to be honest, I'm kind of keen to try out a Mendocino handheld gaming APU, even though it just has two RDNA 2 compute units. It's probably enough to play Age of Empires or something. Like, I am curious how fun that would be. I would want to try that. Jacob Bull, thoughts on an ultra wide screen laptop? Yeah, I don't know. On laptops, I feel like you're going to go in the other direction, right? I see more laptops bringing back the 16 by 10 aspect ratio because they're small. So if you've got a small device that you often use for like a typewriter, like a word processing unit, I think you'd actually more so want it to go to a 16 by 10 ratio than a 16 or 21 by 9 ratio. Like a 21 by 9 laptop would kind of be weird, wouldn't it? Like, wouldn't it be hard to fit on like a tray in a airplane? I think more likely you see more laptops experiment with 16 by 10 than you see ultra widescreen laptops. There will be some, and I'd be curious if that worked out well, but I think you can already see the market's actually going in the other direction. All right, let's see. Yeah, I'm seeing people write in, I'd rather have a 5 by 4 or 4 by 3 laptop, and I think I probably agree. Honestly, I like 16 by 9. Tom, what is the cheapest video card you would get for 4K 120 hertz HDR gaming? Well, it depends. Are you willing to turn down settings? I'd recommend a used 3080 right now for like $550, honestly. And I've seen 6800 XTs for under 600 uh for like 550 on eBay as well. So that's what I recommend. But if you can get like a under $400 6700 XT, yeah, you're gonna have to turn down a decent amount of settings, but like you said, budget. That's under 400. I think that'll get you there, you know. But honestly, at this point, I'd try to stretch my budget to like a used 6800 XT or 3080. That's what I would do right now. If you really want 4K 120, so you want to do it well, see if you can stretch your budget to a good used card. Ray writes in, thank you for the tip. Do you think we'll see console like PCs again, like Steam Machines experiment, like that Steam Machines experiment? What should they change to succeed? We see it now with the Steam Deck. This is success, unlike Steam machines. And I think in many ways, Valve is using the Steam Deck as a Trojan horse to make a product that gets support so they can finally develop their own gaming OS that's actually used. Who cares if it's in a Steam Deck? It's being used. And so they can take that then and make a Steam console. And I think they might. Go listen to the Sadly It's Bradley Broken Silicon from a couple weeks ago. We openly discussed this idea of like a Phoenix based mini gaming console from Valve because that could be coming. And would that be as strong as a PS5? No. And in fact, it'd probably be closer to like a PS4 Pro in performance, although admittedly with a way stronger CPU than a PS4 Pro. But that's enough performance for some people. And if they can make that small enough, I don't see why they couldn't. They could use that for like portable VR devices as well. So, yeah, I think we're going to see more experiments again from Valve. I think. I'm not 100% sure, but frankly, the Steam Deck is what a successful Steam console looks like. They did it. It's just a handheld and they're using that as a Trojan horse to develop an OS for a bunch of other products in the future. That's what I think is going on. Nabu Sad writes in, hello again. Thank you for the tip again. What are your thoughts on the companies such as Nintendo, Sony removing purchase content without any repercussions and Sony returning to portable? Well, those are two questions. Um, I haven't seen removing purchase content that much. I think they've just made it so you can't buy new content right now. I know Nintendo's had a really bad track record of like removing things you paid for. So I can't speak to that, but I don't know. There's a reason I buy physical on console still when I can, There is a reason I do. Having said that, like if you buy Far Cry 6 digitally on like a PS5, I don't think they're removing that from the store. I don't know. I don't have much to say about it, to be honest. Now, what about Sony removing to portable? Uh, I know for a fact they made a Vita 2 device. I can't describe it because I was told if I described what it looked like, I could actually, someone might figure out what it is, but I'm 100% sure they were considering a Vita 2 and just canceled it. I don't think Sony really needs to return to portable. I think they should just find a way to make like an Xperia phone with a gaming controls on it and then actually make it have games or something. Yeah, I don't know. That's what I think. And if they were to develop a new portable console, honestly, do you know what I think they should do? They've got such a large library of PS4 games. I think that what they'd want to do is make it compatible with PS4 and PS5. That's what they should do. I'm not exactly sure how it would work, but they you'd have to find a way to basically force PS5 games to run at a lower resolution perfectly every time. But if they could do that, and I'm sure they could at least do that with the PS4 right now, like what they could do, like, right, because what Sony could do is make a variant of the PS5 APU that only has 18 compute units, but that means it's completely backwards compatible with PS4. And then they just run all games at 1080p anyways. That's kinda what I think they would wanna do so that they could have their entire library, because I think what Nintendo discovered with the Switch, and it's, like, about time they discovered this. Nintendo discovered that if you're gonna make a portable console, it has to share the library with your main console or it's stupid. Like, if you look at the Vita, Sony was making Golden Abyss, and they were just they're paying developers to make games that they couldn't sell on PlayStation 4, which was a bizarre business decision. If Sony were to make a new portable console, it either needs to be an Android phone that happens to be able to game well, which is kind of where I would more suspect the direction they would go, or they need to get like a PS5, PS4 APU hybrid that's like basically a half PS5 on 4 nanometer that uses like 15 watts. That's literally backwards compatible with PS4 and with most PS5 games. It just runs the PS5 games in 1080p. They do something like that. They're like, hey, you can literally play all of your PS5 games on PS4 on this portable PS5. I think that'll sell well. But unless they manage to do that, I think it's stupid. I think making a separate portable gaming device that doesn't share the gaming ecosystem they've made that's making them so much money would be just bad business. But it'd be cool if they did. I don't know if I would honestly buy it. I already have a laptop, but it'd be an interesting idea. Heath Dunn writes in, thank you for the tip. And he says, do you think that Sony is possibly making a shooter like SOCOM? Yes. Yes, I do. I think they are. They don't have an exclusive shooter, and it seems like a no-brainer. Well, they do technically, but they haven't made a new iteration of one for a while. That's first person. In some ways, I think this was an accident. I don't think they tried to like not make first person shooters anymore, but at the same time, I think they also realized, hey, if we have killer third person shooters, there's a million first person shooters on the market. Why don't we just let Activision and Dice make those? But now you have Activision and Dice dropping the ball, and that just now is the perfect time for a new Killzone or SOCOM. That's what's so funny. So, do I think they're working on a SOCOM though? I absolutely do. I do. I can't. I know other people have alleged they are. I won't say I'm 100% sure though. I don't have a source saying that, but I think they are. Warfic writes in. Thank you for for the tip. Sorry for asking, but if you have any update on Zen 4 and other Zen 3D, like what's been suggested about a 5600 X3D last month. Listen to the last Broken Silicon. I directly talk about it for a while. That is my honest to God answer. Pull up the last Broken Silicon. Me and Dan talk about it. That is what I think. Um, Otherwise, I would just say I'll repeat this, guys. They don't have one coming right now. Like motherboard manufacturers would be briefed on this if they had a Zen 4 AM4 product coming soon. Um, you know, so if it is coming, it's not coming until probably at the same time or after Raphael, not before. So let's just leave it at that. But thank you for the tip. Davis writes in with a tip as well. Thoughts on Framework Inc.'s model versus future comp? Um, I don't know what their future product is. I know a friend with a Framework laptop, and I know they really like it, or a friend that's a couple. I have two friends that are a couple that have a Framework laptop, and they like it. There, I said it correctly. Oh yeah, I'm looking at it right now. This is a really cool laptop. I would actually consider getting this myself in the future. It's just let me put a GPU in it. But that is cool. Yeah, I don't know about their future upcoming stuff. I would want it to support Phoenix or a dedicated GPU though before I bought one. But I have to say it looks really nice. Um, and they definitely nailed the form factor. Heath Dunn writes, and again, thank you for the tip. Remember, Heath, if you're on the Patreon, you can just ask these questions for free. So consider supporting us on Patreon. And then you can also ask the next guest questions before we record on Sunday. It says, I don't understand why Sony just hasn't come out with a PlayStation phone. Well, they did with the Xperia Play, kinda. But he says, I feel like it would take so much market share. Oh, I wouldn't be sure of that. You know, we say we want a PlayStation phone, but like, do we? Like, I think Sony could have done a better job selling the Xperia Play, but I'm sorry, like Apple and Samsung and LG are so dominant in Huawei and the smartphone market. Most people don't want a gaming phone. So I don't know what it would be worth for it to sell well. And I would argue it would be better to focus on just a portable PS5 APU because then at least you're not cutting into anything that you're already making. Um, but I think it would at least be cool for them to release a new Xperia Play-like device. I would consider getting it, but that's the funny thing is I say I'd consider. I don't even know if I would. I kind of just like having a really thin, compact phone that I don't game on the go that much anymore. So I don't know. I don't know because the problem with making a gaming phone is it going to be that strong? Is it going to use the newest APU? Well, at that point, you're making like a $1,000 phone, right? Because you're going to want to compete with the highest end stuff. Because really, if you make a PlayStation phone, it should actually probably be a budget $400 device so you can sell it to kids as well or something. And at that point, it's like hard to market though with the best stuff. Basically, what you're saying is you would take a phone, probably cheap out on the screen so you get a high frame rate, like make it 1080p or 720p even. Give it an extra big battery, put some controls on it, and give it a cheaper camera, and then market it for like, teenagers and stuff. Would that sell well? Maybe, but I wouldn't be so sure. Most people seem to buy phones for their cameras and stuff now. Thoughts on UCIe from Jason Q. Thank you for the tip. Let me see here. Oh, no, I do not have any thoughts on this. Thank you for the tip. I'll put a link in the description for this for what you're referencing. But no, I do not have, you know, anything to say about it. Let me see. FF writes, and my question really was not about handheld gaming devices, but if Epic and Valve might join the console war. Well, they have though, haven't they? The Steam Deck is joining the console war. And I'm sorry, like Steam competes with consoles to a certain extent. I don't think for the same reason I don't think it makes sense for Sony to make a handheld gaming device that can't run PS5 and PS4 games, right? That's what I think Sony should do. For that same reason, I also don't think Valve should launch a console that really pulls too much away from PC gamers. They've got a good thing going with Steam. So why launch an elaborate console when you can just better support Steam? Why would Sony launch a new handheld unless it can run their PS4 games? Does that make sense? So no, I don't see them making their own console in like a fully traditional sense that competes with PC. Nabu Sad writes in again. I know VR is the next big thing. I just find it cumbersome to wear something on your head to game. I personally think it will never catch an. I personally think it will continue to be a gimmick. Oh, I don't think it's going anywhere now. But it's already got like what Quest 2's to like 10 million units sold. PSVR 2 isn't even out yet. We'll see if that sells over 10 million. And the Quest 3 is coming. Apple's going to launch a VR device. I'm like almost 100% sure. Yeah, I'm 100% sure of that now. It's widespread to the people I've talked to at Meta and Sony that they're aware of like an Apple VR device. So that's coming. And once Apple launches it, it becomes mainstream usually. So no, VR is not a gimmick. I don't think so. Eric Winberg says, I'm late here just to say thanks. Thank you for the tip. Um, Ray writes in, do you think we'll see PC centric game development again? What should change for that to happen? I thought about Nvidia, Intel, and AMD forming studios. No, I don't want anything centric. I just want the games to work, you know. And I think there is PC centric game development though every now and then, like Cyberpunk, which just didn't work on console, which wasn't nice to those people. But and you have like RTS games that, of course, are primarily for PC, if not only for PC. No, I think with x86 being on console, it just makes sense to develop games for everyone. And why not? I think you should add keyboard and mouse support to consoles, and I think you should add good controller support to PC. Let everyone play. Come on. Owl DB PBRL or Nola Owl writes in and says, nothing. Gives me a tip. Thank you. Jacob Bull writes in, will the RTX 4090 run games at 4K Ultra with 120 frames per second? Yes, absolutely it will. I would argue you already can do that pretty easily with modern cards, let alone a 4090 that doubles performance. I think 4K 120 is going to be a joke with Lovelace, to be honest. Yeah, Janelle Gibno says, I've tried a gaming phone and it heats up like a volcano. You need to attach a fan accessory just to keep playing. Right, which is why if Sony made a gaming phone, I am assuming they would lower the resolution, give it a bit better cooling and a bigger battery so that it doesn't get as hot. Yeah. So, all right, we're probably going to wrap this up now. I'd say you guys got 1 minute to submit questions. I usually go for just 2 hours. So, if you're in the Discord, Moore's Law is talking. Last chance in the after video chat. And if you're going to put in a tipped question, last chance. Last call here. I do have to prepare for a guest later tonight, anyways. Yep, and he will be here soon. Eat some Vite ramen on stream. It's, I'll eat ramen tonight, but not on stream. Sorry. Get out the vacuum. How about not? Remember though, if you support Vite Ramen, use I think it's Moore's Law as the offer code. Make sure you can find the sponsor page though. Make sure you support my sponsors if you want to find ways to support me. If not on Patreon, whether it's Shaker and Spoon, which Shaker and spoon as well. Look up the link in the last video I did. Hoping to have a mixed drink sponsor as well, and that's been doing very well. All right, people. I've been going for 2 hours. I don't really see any other questions. Abstract Realism says, reading any good books? Station 11 and Cloud Atlas. I'll recommend those. If you like the movies and shows, the books are just as good, if not better. So, all right, let me get the doggo up here. Reese. Which Reese is fighting cancer right now. So do know that a lot of your donations will go towards getting her chemotherapy. She's got her second one in a couple of weeks. Reese, here, puppy. Here, puppy Ed. Up. Come here. Yeah, you can kind of see. Where is it? There's where she had the IV put in. But yeah, so she's doing well right now, though. Still plenty of walks and runs and hikes. But yeah, unfortunately, she has cancer, but we're trying to treat her. So just know that if you support Moore's Law is Dead, you're supporting this doofus right here. Reese, need to brush your teeth. All right, everybody. Remember to support Moore's Law is Dead. Use the offer code that's on the Moore's Law is Dead website for Bite Ramen. Use the links in the description and the offer codes for Shaker and Spoon. Support us on Patreon is the best way to support us. Send us a super thanks. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend, everybody. Tell your friends about us. Blah, blah, blah. Thank you for watching.